My friends, can we finally find out what is behind this mysterious door on GoldenEye's Runway? And what's the deal with this alcove in Diddy Kong Racing's Spaceport Alpha? What about this mysterious house in Pilotwings? What's it supposed to represent? Well, today we're plunging in with another deep dive into various textures, structures, and oddities throughout the world of the Nintendo 64, finally solving and exploring some mysteries I've had on my mind for decades. So pour yourself a nice beverage, get comfy, and here we go.
Here we go!
We'll start with the Spaceport Alpha alcove in Diddy Kong Racing's Future Funland. I wouldn't blame you for not noticing this at any time in the past. After all, a lot of people didn't even unlock Future Funland in their youthful playthrough of the game. But if you did unlock this course and then took time to turn around at the start-finish line, you would see this weird alcove. What is it? Well, to a keen eye with some Diddy Kong Racing experience, this alcove looks very similar in size and shape to other alcoves, like the ones on Snowball Valley or Crescent Island, where you find the large key used to unlock the respective world's battle minigame. So could this imply that there was once a battle minigame for Future Funland as a whole that was planned or made and perhaps got cut last minute? Diddy Kong Racing is already chock full of content. There's so much more to do in this game than its counterpart Mario Kart 64, so can you imagine if there was supposed to be even more to do? What would this battle minigame have been like on Future Funland, and what would we have done? There's a lot of things to be uncovered in the game, even deleted tracks as I've explored to some extent before, but nothing's ever come up that's obviously been Future Funland's minigame, so perhaps it was never made at all and only conceived. One thing worth pointing out is that this alcove is in a much simpler location than the other keys strewn about through the world, which are usually more out of the way, well hidden, and difficult to find. So some have speculated this could have just been a placeholder or test alcove, where the devs might have put a key just to test picking it up and unlocking the cutscene and things like that, but development never got much further with it. The cutting room floor says that in the DS remake of the game, there's a power-up token in here rather than it being removed entirely. A strange alcove, indeed. Check out this secret from Mario Golf 64, something I'm truly amazed by because I know this game pretty well and never heard about this, even on the cutting room floor or other places where you would expect to find such deep lore. Dr. Biz Gaming posted this to YouTube and Reddit a little while ago, unused moon graphic in Mario Golf. The post reads this: I've been ROM hacking Mario Golf 64 and discovered an unused moon graphic. It's usable in game. I made a video on the driving range with Yoshi on my channel, but just want to share the picture here. And we see shared video footage of using Yoshi on the driving range with the moon graphic in play. I truly never knew this existed, nor did any others that I know, so it's a truly amazing feat by Dr. Biz to dig this out of the game's code. I suppose it may have been intended to be used in tied matches that extend into the night, which are always cool to see, and are in fact the setting of one of the earliest videos on my very own channel right here, but perhaps the developers cut it for one reason or another. It just goes to show you that you never really know what could be discovered in the deep code of these video games, even 25 to 30 years later. This door here on Runway has been driving me nuts, really, for 25 or 30 years now. It just always stands out as a door that looks like it could open. If you press B at it, not even a door is locked or anything, no interaction. But it feels like, could there be like a secret base in there? Secret hallways, some secret bunker where there's more guards and some more objectives that were cut. That's sort of the dream to discover as a young lad. That's where your imagination takes you. So let's find a few ways to maybe access this door or see what's behind it. So the mystery of the runway door, the door on the runway. The first thing we're going to try is using the Gameshark code walk through doors, which I have on right now, as you can see. You're able to simply phase through doors, pretty convenient. You can also phase through some objects, but take a look. Right through the door, right through the desk, in fact. I can't even actually climb into the tank with this cheat on because you pass right through the tank as well. So it's a very useful Gameshark code, but the problem, as you'll see, is, as I walk through these tanks, that even if I get to this door with walk-through doors on, it is no different than just strafing into a solid wall. You know, if I strafe into a wall, same thing. You're walking to the wall, nothing's happening, and alas, this door, strafing right into it. Perhaps this is not a harbinger, hopefully not a harbinger, of what may come. But walk-through doors, unsuccessful at getting through that infamous runway door. The next thing we're going to try is this Gameshark code that I found on the old Death Star website called Destroy Almost Anything. And the way it works is, you know, every level has its own code, or a handful of levels are grouped together, and you are just firing non-stop without even pressing Z. I'll leave up some footage of exactly what's going on. And importantly, one of the things that you can destroy are doors. So let's give this a go on Runway and see what happens. So look at this madness. It's just non-stop shooting, even without pressing anything, even with one controller. You know, sometimes you would be able to see those shots with a 2.x control style. Some strategies were developed that way. And look, just these doors are being destroyed. It even still says this door leads back into the gas plant. But I destroyed that one. The guard can see me and come in here. We can destroy this one, which is pretty epic. Just remarkable stuff. And even there's one really crazy thing that I must show you all before we head to the mysterious runway door and try to find out what could be happening there. And that is, even if we shoot the tank, it blows up and just disintegrates. That's pretty crazy. You know, there's some doors and gates that don't blow up, but as we got the picture of, you know, most of the doors and objects like this blow up. And, you know, there's some things that typically blow up in this game, like chairs and boxes and so on, and those tend to explode. But obviously this destroy everything cheat does destroy more than usual. So let's see if it'll take out this runway door. And unfortunately, it does not. You know, it only takes a few shots to destroy any of these other objects, and it is just simply not destroying this door. Press B at it, no way to access it. That is really a tragic situation. Can we ever find out what is behind that door? If I go over here, you know, it's kind of interesting because you can't even destroy the battery here, which I find quite interesting, even though I'm shooting it a bunch of times and all the other stuff got destroyed. And these drones on Runway can't be destroyed either. So, you know, this destroy everything cheat is a bit of a misnomer. Certainly an interesting Gameshark code to have been found, you know, 25 years ago, but it doesn't do the trick for us here, unfortunately. Is there any other code we could try? Well, indeed, this set of codes is the Debug code, which can allow us to do all sorts of crazy things. Let's try this and see what happens. Alright, so I have walk-through doors on, not that it matters. I have invisibility and invincibility on, and we have on the Debug code, which we can use to do something that I've never done before in GoldenEye, and is pretty remarkable, and has all sorts of other repercussions as well. So let's take a look. We'll stand right here. I'm going to press up C and down C and start, and we're in the Debug code. And now you can barely see what the text is saying, but I can use the D-pad to select the various text boxes. You can see one of them is turning red. If I click move view and press start, I can now move outside of Bond's body. Okay, now this is interesting. And I always kind of love how you can really see Bond's face there. That's unusual unto its own self. And I can just move free cam around, which, you know, it's amazing it took me all this time of making GoldenEye content to do so. But hey, we can move around, and by goodness gracious, we can probably get in behind this door. Let's take a look. Wow, my friends. It's truly remarkable. There's nothing back here. There's the door frame. There's even that KF7 that we got off of guard in front of the door. We're behind here, and there's nothing. It's void, blue space, just as to be expected. And you can kind of see behind these tanks, which is cool to see the sort of full breadth of that texture. But there's nothing back here. There's no hidden facility, no hidden bunker, nothing on Earth going on. Well, we can even kind of get into this area with the drone, which is interesting. And, I mean, I hate to say it, but I found this kind of disappointing because, like, certainly for many, many years, this door always mystified me. And this is not a satisfying conclusion. You know, like, what is this? We're in a void. Now, it's understandable when you kind of grow up and learn more about video games that that's all it was ever going to be, is a void. There's nothing there. Nothing was ever made. But it can't help the sort of youthful mind imagining what could be in here. And in a way, and I think this comes to many parts of life too, is like, I just, you know, you grow old and you kind of resent how everything becomes demystified in a way. You know, there's so much childish wonder and this imagination that anything is possible. And it kind of is to a large extent, but, you know, you eventually learn that your video games don't have all these magic secrets. And this kind of runs counter to what I just talked about in Mario Golf, about that kind of moon texture being found, because that is kind of a cool hidden secret. And certainly over the years, finding new strategies in GoldenEye, you know, these are the hidden secrets that lay within that are pretty cool. New strategies, new shortcuts in Mario Kart 64 that I never imagined would be possible. You know, all these crazy things you find that do unleash that magic. But then it comes to this point, this runway door, and it's like, man, it just saps all the magic away. Another thing I kind of noticed is, like, let's say I go far away from Bond, it really glitches up the game in camera. Like, I just kind of void out. And that's because the game can't even load that far away of where I am. You know, barely, I went so far, I can barely figure out where I was and sort of restore the camera. And this sort of leads to another place where, you know, you wonder about these strategies in game, these speedrun strategies, about if you could do something in the beginning or any of the level, or like throw a mine across through walls into another part of the level and complete objectives. And in some cases we can, like Control's a good example of some mine throws, and Surface 2. But in other cases with this free camera roaming, it just really hits you again, like, man, the secret isn't here. Like, this is just, I can only scroll around here, only this sort of section of the level's loaded, and like there's nothing more to it. And it kind of finally hits me using this debugging menu and the move view, free camera move view, that it really all kind of comes together and hits me for what it is. Okay, so I'm back in the Bond view now, and I'm going to strafe over to here. The gates of doom that we've always imagined. You know, what's beyond these gates? A lot of people thought maybe do these connect to dam? You know, wouldn't that be cool to see? Or let alone, what if we can get back into the facility over here? And if I do the free camera here, let's take a look. So if we go behind these gates, again, it's just a blue void. Nothing that interesting. You know, a little pocket, I can move a little bit more and see some stuff, but nothing that notable or interesting. And then even if I get over here and go through this gate, you know, yeah, look, that's the extent of what's built. There's no secret facility. You can't get back into the facility. It just is what it is. And you know the worst part of it all is you can only move out of your body at an even plane. I can't even look up down, so I can't go down and explore the, you know, where this vent leads on facility downwards. I can only move at an even plane with when I left the field of existence. So I can't even, like, free explore a level and, you know, climb the Aztec walls or the cavern spiral with this. I can only go, you know, forward, back, left, and right. And so even though I found this whole debug menu, you know, you'd think, is this going to unleash every secret in the game? And certainly it unleashes some, it unveils some, but not all. And that's almost even a greater tragedy than what I could possibly have imagined. Now, one solace, as we'll see with these cheats on, is with the Destroy Everything code on Surface 1 and presumably Surface 2, you can indeed destroy the whole satellite dish, which is pretty cool. My friends, do you recognize this shape? Indeed, this is none other than the United States of America, or at least a pretty crude map from the video game Pilotwings 64. Now, forgive the mouse and keyboard sounds, but I'm on the noclip.website to make this easier. Here we are zooming into a little illustration of Los Angeles, which is pretty cool and dandy. We go up the west coast to San Francisco with the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge, up to the northwest with Seattle and the Space Needle, which was, of course, built for the 1962 World's Fair, Expo 62, showcasing space and whatnot. And, you know, it's a cool little miniature of the United States of America with the Grand Canyon here. We have, you know, the flyover states, some beautiful farmland. We have Chicago and the Sears Tower. You know, I know all my Midwestern folks and Chicagoites, you know, it's called the Willis Tower now, but they still call it the Sears Tower, so shout out there. Look, even a beautiful Lake Michigan, and over here we have the wonderful New York City with these beautiful towers, this pair of towers and the Statue of Liberty, because of course this game was made in 1996, you know, when these towers were still there, and it was an accurate representation of the city. So generally speaking, these are accurate representations with a lot of landmarks that are familiar. You know, here's Washington, D.C. I've talked about this before. That one is actually rotated 90 degrees for some strange reason. But generally speaking, the landmarks are accurate and they're representative of that city or that region. But there's a mysterious house that I want to take a look at over there, and this is Florida now, which is entirely like the space station launch pads, Cape Canaveral, which is pretty interesting that they chose that. But hey, I guess they couldn't choose Disneyland because that would have been, you know, Disney would have gone after them. Okay, so fair enough. Great, United States of America. I'm just going to zoom up here. We can see right there in the middle, that's the St. Louis Arch, and this is, of course, the Mississippi River coming down. Pretty epic. Okay, so all in all, we've established that these are fair representations of real United States of America. If I come on into the Mississippi River and go west, I get to this zone. Now, this should be like in Louisiana. You know, right here should be Louisiana. We get this quite a remarkable driveway, gate, and estate with a fountain and some kind of barn or farm structure. And like, what is this house supposed to be? And this has mystified me for years since I first noticed it. You know, Pilotwings 64 does not have a lot of discussion about it online. It really does not. It came out so early into the N64's life cycle, you know, it was a launch title with Super Mario 64, and then it was quickly overshadowed and forgotten. So there's like no discussion online. No one has ever stopped to ponder, what is this house? You know, is it supposed to be a notable landmark? And I've established, you know, throughout the course of the United States here that, like, there are a lot of landmarks. And so is this supposed to be one? We have this long driveway leading up to a sort of roundabout with a fountain. And so at first I thought about a couple places that it might be. And I'll zoom out here again to show you on the map. It's on the west of the Mississippi, kind of Louisiana. At first I thought, you know, could it be something like Churchill Downs, you know, the horse racing track? And, you know, that's not it, because Kentucky is not in this location. And it's not really a horse racing track. That was just kind of a first thought. I also thought, could this be you know, Augusta National, the golf and country club, the host site of the Masters tournament. And this long driveway could be like Magnolia Lane, the legendary Magnolia Lane that you approach as you get towards the course. But, you know, that's not in the right place at all. Georgia would be, you know, a little bit northeast of here. So, like, what is this supposed to be? You know, could it really be just like a random governor's mansion? That does not seem very satisfying if that's the case. But lo and behold, on the other side of the Mississippi, so on the east side now, we get to an identical mansion. And this one's kind of buried in, you know, in the weeds, in the trees. We can't get as great of a look at it. It's not as well kept, which is interesting. And so, like, what's going on here? Is this supposed to be something? Now with this one, and I noticed this like shack over in the corner on the same sort of cut of property, which I found kind of interesting. And so I was wondering, you know, what is this supposed to be, if anything? And for a second I thought, you know, could this be an homage to none other than Elvis Presley? Could this be Graceland and his modest shack where he was born in Tupelo, Mississippi? And, you know, again, that doesn't quite make sense because this, you know, we're on the east side of the Mississippi. This is like, you know, Florida's down there. Okay, there's Florida. This would be like, what, Alabama? Something like that. And, or Mississippi. So it almost makes sense, but not quite. And so I just really don't know what these houses could be. Now, there is a sort of, we'll say, darker explanation. You gotta remember, this is Nintendo in 1996 making a crude representation of the United States of America. And we're in the Deep South, the Dixie South, some might say. Although that term, well, you know, could these simply be representations of the Deep South? You know, old plantation houses with the great manor there, you know, something out of like Django Unchained, and these shanty shack for the help. You know, could that be what this is representing? If we go to this one, we got two shacks here and a big farm. And is that sort of what Nintendo was getting at with this pair of houses? Either way, I find these houses to be truly among the most mysterious locations on the Nintendo 64, and one that frankly no one has really talked about before, and so I want to talk about it here and hear what your thoughts are. Something I will say, though, is if we go all the way up here and we look at Mario on Mount Rushmore, you know, this is clearly supposed to be Mount Rushmore, right? Now, pay attention as I back up and zoom out, because Mount Rushmore is in South Dakota. And if we look at where we are on the map of the United States, I mean, they've put Mount Rushmore in, like, Wyoming or Idaho. Montana, maybe. Like, that is not where Mount Rushmore is. It would be, you know, more towards the top of the Mississippi River up there. So, clearly not everything is precise and accurate in this game. And that might lend some sort of credence to that these, you know, governor's mansions, these neoclassical mansions down here are not supposed to be exactly a representation of any famous landmark, and they're just more of a representation of the Deep South. And maybe that is the case. But there's one more thing I want to show you all, and if we go west here, we get to, in sort of West Texas, we get to a pretty cool place, which is this dainty, shanty western town. And we have all this kind of cool stuff, a mercantile, the Lucky Cuss store? You'd think at a glance it's like the Lucky Cross, but it's like the Lucky Cuss store. Dilapidated buildings here, a hotel, and a few other things. But like lastly, and you know, very dilapidated, as one would expect, you know, as if we're filming Rust starring Alec Baldwin out here or something of the like. But over here on the edge of town, we get to what is clearly a gallows where in these old western towns, you would go to, well, you know, make a show of telling the bad guy that he can't run rampant on town anymore. And for a cutesy little Nintendo game, that is just a crazy, crazy thing to see. And really amazed me. And what can you say other than that, my friends, is truly remarkable. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this look at some more Nintendo 64 oddities and textures with me today. Thanks to you for watching. Thanks to the Patreon supporters for supporting on Patreon. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you all in the next stream or video.